Итак, добрый вечер.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats in this room. It's time to start our conference, and I welcome all our guests and participants at our panel, which has become a traditional one. Last year, our session was called "The Sea is Calling," and this year, the topic of our conference is as follows: Sea and River Transport, a systemic element of mainline infrastructure. We all understand that any weak link in this chain can result in failures in the transport infrastructure. We know that there has been not so much positive news because there's a lot of global conference and other challenges which the national economy and the transport sector in particular are facing. What do we do next? Right now, there is the Minister of Iran, which has visited Moscow, and I had an interview with the ambassador of Iran in Russia, Mr. Mehdi Sanai, and I asked him the question of how to survive in this difficult international political context. We know that Iran has more experience of surviving in isolation than Russia, and he told me that the answer is to rely on oneself and, of course, to strengthen the partnership with our neighbors, with the regional partnership. During this discussion, we will also talk about the prospects of sea and river transport development, and I give the floor to Yevgeny Dietrich, the Minister of Transport of Russia. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm happy to see you once again in this wonderful hall. This traditional round table, this industry conference, is where we are supposed to discuss the issues of sea and river transport as part of the updated transport strategy of Russia. And an important task is the redistribution of transport flows from land transport to sea and river transport. This is the challenge not only due to our internal needs, but many of our international partners are telling us that it is important to develop our waterways, our water routes, to transport cargoes more efficiently without overloading the land routes that are designed for passenger transportation. Sea transportation today is one of the three parts of the transport industry with the greatest capacity. The Russian president has repeatedly mentioned the need to increase the level of safety of navigation and sea navigation. And today, as part of this conference, I would like to discuss the factors of competitiveness of the Russian sea and river transport and the competitive advantages of these means of transport. I would like to discuss how we can improve the environmental safety of this type of transport. I would like to talk about the efficiency and the energy efficiency of this transport and about how we should reduce our transport costs. This is part of the transport development in the entire Russia. And the Ministry of Transport has prepared a relevant program based on the May presidential decrees. Three projects that are part of this transport plan concern water transport. I'm talking about the development of Northern Sea route and internal water routes, river routes. Russia has a lot of ports, 67 ports with a capacity of more than 1 billion tons of cargo per year. And every year this capacity keeps increasing. Moreover, the Russian industry can use the competitive advantages of Russia and the international domestic situation, and it requires the enlargement of the port capacity. One infrastructure project over the past years concerns an increase in this capacity. For example, the Soviet port construction. And of course, it is the sustainable development of the Arctic region and further development of the Northern Sea route that are paramount. It's a region with rich oil and gas resources. Using it, we are capable of becoming a leader of sea transportation. And this can also encourage the relevant energy projects. We can develop the icebreaker infrastructure right now, and we can tap this potential. Other countries suggest using the Northern Sea route for transporting their cargoes via this route. Even with the icebreaker's capacity, this proves to be cheaper than the traditional transportation routes. This is also a driver of port infrastructure development, and the Ministry of Transport has described it in the relevant parts of its comprehensive plans. There's also another priority project, North-South. This is a railway route which is going to become the cheapest and the most economical alternative to the Suez Canal. We are also planning to improve the quality of domestic water routes. This is also part of the plan. The cargo volumes for river transport are not so high as for the sea routes, but their development will provide an incentive for shipbuilding and for the development of adjacent industries, which would also result in automation and further IT development. Thank you. Thank you, Yevgeny. The floor is now given to Presidential Aide Igor Levitin. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear Yevgeny. I would like to first of all thank Yelena for being really familiar with the sea transport. And she is the moderator. I would like to thank Evelina because she is a really great expert on the sea transport. Thank you very much, Evelina, who has been moderating all our conferences. I would really like to mention that it is very important to form very big transport corridors with huge capacity. Let's take the south, for example. In the north, we have a modern port which can accept ships with great capacity. But in the south, there's a setback. You remember that we built a railway in 2004 for the Astrakhan port. There was a problem there. We need to look into it to understand what went wrong. And we are preparing further events, and we need ships with big capacity on the Caspian Sea. If we can't do this, transporting 20 or 30 containers by ship just doesn't work. We need ships with big capacity for car transportation. Today, the Caspian Sea is open, and any country which would offer new models for cargo transportation will dominate the Caspian region. And I hope that the Ministry of Transport will be able to resolve these issues together with the Ministry of Industry. We need to be able to build ships just like that. In the south, I believe that the most modern port has been built. Teman technologically is the most innovative. It can take any ships of the maximum capacity that can go through the Bosphorus Channel. And this is the only port that can take ships of this capacity. The next area is northwest. We've mentioned Sabeta. This is a breakthrough. And you have heard about the Northern Sea Route. There is the decree of transporting 80 million tons, and the Sabeta port will take most of that capacity. Talking about the challenges that we might have. You know, when the Ministry of Transport was created in 2004, we had this management chain, the ministry, the agency, and the company. And there was a moment when the deputy minister was also the leader of the agency. And I believe that the leader of an agency can't be a deputy minister at the same time, because someone should be in charge, someone should be responsible for the work not conducted on schedule. So actually the legislative framework was mixed up with the operating activities of the agency. With respect to the transfer of the Northern Sea Route, we are passing it on to the Russian, to Rosatom. But we need to take it very seriously. We need to look at how it's going to function. How is it going to work out for the consignor? Of course, the presidential decree will be followed, but I believe that the Ministry of Transport, the agency, and all the relevant authorities should prepare the necessary legislative acts. Because if we do not transport 80 million tons, then we need to understand who is responsible for that. As to the river transport, over these years we were unable to do really powerful mainline routes along these waterways, but I still believe that the river transport is a competitor to other means of transport, and we need to make sure that river transport is available, that it is safe and cheap enough for the consumers. I participate in all sea and river transport conferences, and I believe that you are the leaders in terms of cargo transportation. So good luck with your projects. Thank you. Thank you very much, Igor, for this important advice. And we invite Yuri Tsvetkov, a Deputy Minister of the Transport of Russia, Alexei Klevin, President of the Russian Union of the Russian Chamber of Navigation, Sergei Frank, CEO, Power Sovcomflot, Vyacheslav Ruksha, Deputy CEO at the Directorate of the Northern Sea Route, Pavel Sorokin, Deputy Energy Minister. We welcome you, Pavel. Sergei Khromagin, CEO, POW TGLK. Larisa Korshunova, Director for Cooperation with Government Agencies. United Transport and Logistics Company, and Mr. Bazhanov, the head of refurbishment and investment. All the participants of our discussion are here on the stage, and we are going to have a panel discussion we invite the audience to participate in our voting. And please, not more than 5 minutes for your presentations, because we also have speakers in the first row who also have something to say. Moser Rich Flood is a traditional investor and sponsor of this conference, so I suggest that the leader of this organization tell us about the role and place of sea and river transport in the transport infrastructure. Thank you very much, Evelina. I'm happy to welcome you once again at the industry conference, Sea and River Transport, a systemic element of mainline infrastructure. What is sea and river transport? It's a means of transportation which is really safe and efficient. It is impossible to use the northern routes without this kind of transport. It's also impossible to use those routes which traditionally involve rivers. It's impossible to use those routes for which there are no land alternatives. It removes the load from car roads. The May decree of the Russian president sets the goals for this sector until 2024, and there are 3 key tasks in the sea and river transport. That is, increasing the capacity of seaports by 1/3, ensuring 80 million tons capacity of the Northern Sea Route, and ensuring the capacity of internal water routes, improving that capacity. Our agency has developed a comprehensive plan to achieve those goals. And those 3 goals should be ensured by the sea and river transport. This includes sea transport, river transport, and internal water routes. As you know, internal water routes are about 100,000 kilometers long, and most of them have guaranteed depths. But there are certain limiting sections, that's 14,000 kilometers. So our task is to remove those bottlenecks within the next 6 years. As a result, internal waterways capacity will be increased by 55 million tons. We are going to build a number of waterway facilities. We will do repair, we'll make those rivers deeper, and we will also use more modern equipment for digging the earth. This will result in a considerable incentive and impetus in further economic improvement, because when we can see that there is a clear picture of what ship can go through what ways, it really gives more transparency to everyone around. Furthermore, this project is also aimed at making deeper the water arteries delivering cargoes to the extreme north area. One strategic area is the development of the Arctic zone of Russia, the Northern Sea Route. Businesses and the Russian government have launched a number of important industrial projects in the Arctic Sea. Recently, it was just 3 or 5 or 6 million tons of capacity, and right now it's already 15 million tons of capacity. The most important project here is the Arctic SPG2 by Novatek.
What tasks do we have for the sea transport? The icebreaker fleet needs to be upgraded. Multifunctional rescue ships need to be built, and so on and so forth. As of the end of the last year, the cargo turnover was around 800 million tons. The growth was 39%. The following 6 years, in the following 6 years, it will be increased by 33%. So the capacity will increase by 35 million tons. So it's the private partnership does all the investments. So it pertains to the railway functions and all those. In Muchka Bay, there are projects that are being implemented. This implementation requires very close cooperation among all of the participants. So we have a project-based method for this, for all of the intermediate years, interim years. There will be a project office created. I think that today we will consider new suggestions for the budget so that the key parameters be implemented faster and more effectively. I hope you have a fruitful discussion, and I hope your work is effective. I suggest we take a vote at the very beginning of our discussion. So the first question is, what hindered the effective work of the sea fleet in 2018? Access to the base, insufficient measures in the national legislation, more rigid requirements for the safety. So please go ahead and take a vote. We can see that there are administrative barriers, national legislation, so it's all in our hands. Igor Evgenievich, can you please comment on your choice and explain the results of the vote? Can we pass the microphone to Igor Evgenievich Levitin? I also voted number 4. So I think that we need to make the management more effective. So I would like to thank everyone who selected this point. This is what we need to do. If we reduce it to 20%, then we'll increase the cargo base. Igor Evgenievich, just a little question to clarify. In the normative, it's in the normative database. The port infrastructure, transportation infrastructure so that they can, reduce all of these issues. Yeah, we want to make everything faster and better, but it doesn't always work out. Next question about the river fleet. Infrastructure restrictions, bottlenecks, rate policy of the natural monopolies, unequal competitive conditions, absence of competitive conditions, and so forth. And 41% of those, so the most people voted for unequal conditions, unequal competitive conditions. So bureaucracy is not a problem, but it's also an internal problem. So I would like to ask our next speaker to comment on the following result. A person from PwC in Russia. Evelina, over to you. First of all, let's speak about the traditional cargo traffic, oil cargoes. The key difference here is that if we compare two equal offers in any market, then the most convenient always wins. So when can it offer better conditions? So it will always offer better flexibility. Railway transport has better advantages, more infrastructure. River transportation can be competitive in two formats. Fairly short distances for different types of cargoes when they are transported in a single system from Karelia to Moscow to Povolzhia to Cherepavets. And then the river, the ships, river, sea. On the distances lower than Volgograd. The key cargo there is wheat. At the same time, in Ostamana, they analyze how to deliver their products to the Caspian, Black, and Mediterranean Sea. And a lot of attention is paid to the internal cargo traffic. Within the program of development of connecting neural facility, part of the TNT program, to develop internal riverways, about 70% of the whole program. The share of the internal water transportation was about 32%. So it was 1.5 times slower, about 1.5%. In Europe, inert cargoes are prevalent, and we can see the growth of container multimodal products. So it's a single deep water system. So we need to optimize the system to consider the trends of the development of the industry. And it is necessary to have an open dialogue. So it's the first step to increase the attractiveness of the river transportation. Inert and project cargoes. Taman, on the one hand, we can see it as a competitor for the first, delivery. But on the other hand, for delivery to the port of the Caucasus. I would like to say a few words about transportation balance. It is a cornerstone decision, criteria, all of these, concerns. And finally, when they compete with each other. So it will lead to a more balanced policy. Thank you. Mikhail Nikolaevich, I would like to ask a more clarifying question. Is it possible to transfer all of the cargo traffic to another direction? Is it possible? What's the probability? 50-50, or is it not possible without significant investments? Well, investments are necessary, but it is also to point out that they've started. So we just, discuss them. Of course, there is the seasonality factor within the framework of the unified deep river system. The development of the plants, and then for the export, and all these, shuttle situations, and they are consumed in the southern federal region. Of course, they need to stimulate the internal distribution. We see that the potential is huge. But we may want to change the routes of the networks. So the money that was invested is lost. Our ancestors built cities along the rivers, and they did it the right way. It's a federal scale task. They are capital intensive, all of these programs, and they cannot do it on their own. And now I would like to give the floor to Sergei Vitalyevich Frank. What we recall first is the northern sea path. So we already spoke about how it came into being. The new port, the Yamal SPG. So what goals are set for those? Good morning, Evelina did it right. So you've immersed in our industry. And we discussed, how to lead a course better. So this is the first slide. The project that's been implemented. The use of gas as the primary fuel will make its way. Vyacheslav Vladimirovich and Yamal, the Yamal icebreaker. And we're very glad for this, project. So it was the first large icebreaker that is using this technology. You asked a question about the vectors of development in the Arctic. 80% use, it's a very large task, very difficult. It provides us with a unique opportunity, puts a lot of responsibility to the companies and their management. I would like to make a suggestion, if I may. Most of our projects, this cargo base, they are within certain contours. So now the question is how to deliver it into the market, how to make them commercially successful. There is no magic. The key question is competitiveness. Those of you who expect sea transport to provide a reliable channel for export and creating a line, so it's more difficult to trade now. So it has to be competitive.
And the products should win the market and occupy their niches. So I can proudly say right now that various research teams, design and shipbuilding teams, have created a set of unique solutions in Russia, which have no analogs all over the world. And reliability and safety in the Arctic region will always be factor number one. Someone might believe that safety is an expensive thing and it's too costly, but actually I can assure you that there will be no savings if there is a failure. This is why the ships should be reliable. We have all our industry leaders here today. So I would like to take this opportunity to say that to fulfill the presidential decree regarding 80 million tons in the Arctic region, we need to take a comprehensive approach. We often build very successful infrastructure. I'm talking about ports and other things like that. But we also need to pay special attention to comprehensive solutions in terms of safety. The Russian human capital is unique in terms of the Arctic region. Now is a very challenging time, and we need to do everything possible to maintain our education, our unique schools of St. Petersburg, the Far East. Our competitors coming to this sector have a poor understanding, often have a poor understanding of what risks exist in this region. This is where Russia has a competitive advantage. And I also believe that we should also pay specific attention to the fleet. Russia has done a great job in terms of reconstructing the port infrastructure. Over the past 20 years, our port infrastructure has been improved hugely. The budgets were very costly, so we invested a lot of private capital, and it's all working. At the first stage, in the 1990s, it was difficult to focus attention on the fleet because our primary task was the infrastructure. And now, in the next 5 to 7 years, and I would ask both Yevgeny and Yuri, all our sea leaders, to make sure that Russia can now build a strong fleet. We have all the unique knowledge, and the Arctic fleet is not just a fleet, it's infrastructure. Most of those ships work within 10-year or 15-year contracts, and this infrastructure should exist in Russia. Shipbuilders are now working on this. We should convert these 80 million tons into the construction of the best fleet in the world. We don't need a lot of fleet in terms of quantity. We should have a reasonable size, but in terms of quality, it should be the best fleet in the world. This is the fine-tuning of infrastructure. It's easier to create this perfect fleet on our own territory than elsewhere. We can talk about the advantages of Russian and international jurisdictions. It's almost about one and the same thing. What we are going to have in the Arctic region is competition between systems of funding the fleet, systems of fleet registration. This is a fairly hostile environment. There is also politics involved. Our competitors are making it harder for us, and we should take it into account. And we should create a situation when it is the strongest that wins, not just the system. So we have to look into this. We have to really resolve this issue. Last but not least, the environment, the Arctic region and safety go hand in hand. And we really believe that gas is the fuel of the future. On the right column, you can see that at our organization, we have already completed several flights to several trips to Rotterdam. We have some very efficient ships, and we have partners who have been working for years with us. I believe that there are a lot of experts here, there are a lot of future experts, and it's good to use gas because in 5 or 6 years we are going to have restrictions in terms of greenhouse gases and CO2. And we need to adapt the plans. This is why we have the gas directive, we have government decrees. We are thankful to the government to the relevant agencies for support of navigation. I believe that green financing should be ensured because this is no idle question. This is an issue that needs to be worked on seriously. The next slide, please. What is also important now is that our shipbuilders are working on this. They have those green tankers, Aframax. We have built some new ships, and we hope that we will have the Starship in 2021. And of course, we will use all our experience to make sure that these tankers are the most efficient ones for transporting Russian oil. Over the past 10 years, our sailors have delivered 226 million tons of oil and 19 million of LNG via the Arctic region. It's more than $100 billion, and this really helped the Russian economy. So we need to take every effort. Of course, we need to continue walking along this path, but I think we will be able to meet all of the challenges. Thank you. Thank you very much for this interesting and comprehensive presentation, but let's add a lot of romantics. It's impossible to develop the fleet without human capital, as you rightly said. Can you tell us what are the special skills that experts of Arctic region navigation should have? I think it would be interesting for some of the students here. Well, we've talked to some of the students, and recently Timofey Guzhenko was named the captain of our ship. That's a ship named after a famous minister of transport. And this man waited for this nomination as captain for 10 years. That's a great experience. It really takes years, even a decade, to train a good captain. It's twice as long as a good doctor, for example, or a good surgeon. We also have great schools, the Makarov schools. We have unique global level academies. Sometimes some people want to reform something, reform those excellent universities and institutes. Some people say that this would actually be good economically and financially, but there might be a lot of technical damage because those universities and academies existed for 200 years, and of course we need to preserve this legacy. Thank you very much. Applause, please. You know, when there is information on news saying that a certain tanker transported a valuable cargo, say oil or gas, to a Chinese port, that's good. But very frequently, well, my question is as follows. When can we tell everyone that it is for the first time that a cargo of fish was transported by Russian tankers? When can we tell everyone that this is why fish became cheaper for everyone in the central part of Russia? In that case, we will not have to convince anyone. That will be the most convincing argument showing why this northern Arctic route is important. And this project will soon be implemented, and I give the floor to Vladislav Ruksho, who will tell us about it. I'm sorry, well, I have something to do with fish, but not really much. Even though today I talked to a representative of our directorate in the city of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, and we are looking into the possibilities of transporting fish in special fish containers from Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky to Arkhangelsk or some other city. That is the route that we supported, and this container ship was already able to deliver those 600 containers. So we do have this task, and together with the government fishing agency, we are going to resolve this issue. And you know that the Northern Sea route that has been recovered can take up thousands of containers. In my opinion, this is a very important task, but the most important thing is that the purchasing power of Russians goes up, and then this fish will make it to the European part of Russia at any rate. But there are some other factors which are worth mentioning. First of all, there's large town navigation or big ship navigation. For example, there's one ship that's 92,000 tons, or there's the icebreaker 57 Years of Victory. That's also about 27,000 tons of capacity. So right now the situation is changing, and this is a crucial factor, because transporting those ships in negative ice conditions for 6 or 7 months, that's a completely new task. And we are interacting very well with our partners. And the important thing is that we can use this canal to make sure that those ships with a capacity of 50,000 tons can go through this canal. So it's also an issue of the new icebreakers that have been built. Unfortunately, there are some challenges, but I want to be optimistic, because it's for the first time that we were able to deliver our own products, and we used Russian technologies instead of the French ones. The second factor, which was also indirectly mentioned, that's support for high-speed modes. If there is a lot of expensive cargo, you can't deliver it at a speed of 1 or 2 miles per hour. It should be 10 or 12 miles per hour. And in this case, icebreakers will really be required, and we will need more support from icebreakers to ensure that. We also believe that the icebreakers that we built under the guidance of the Security Council, that's something that we have built together with Novatek. But I would like to mention that we need icebreakers with 40 megawatt capacity, very powerful icebreakers that will ensure high-speed passage. There's also the project for the Timir coal for oil transportation. This is why we need multifunctional icebreakers. And the important thing is that those projects that are being implemented remain competitive. Those icebreakers should be used for 25 or 30 years, and that's also important for financing, because one example is the icebreakers that we currently deliver under joint financing. There are billions of rubles coming from the federal budget. There are also billions of rubles delivered by our corporation, and the rest of the money is something we borrow. But that's a long-term contract. And there's another important point. Of course, we should start this digitalization, because the summer navigation is becoming ever more active. With the year-round navigation, we have direct contracts with the ship owners. But in the summer navigation mode, it would be really nice to have the same tariffs, to keep the tariffs unchanged, because it's important to be able to deal with any customer and to tell them that, well, this tariff has been considered by the government, it's objective, so you can choose it or not. It's up to you. So I would like to tell you that year-round navigation is about powerful icebreakers, very big and powerful ships. As for summer and autumn navigation, we can service all types of customers. In this case, we can sign long-term contracts, including with 7 global corporations. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. I was a bit concerned about your mentioning the purchasing power of the Russians. So can I draw this conclusion that fish will not become cheaper if we deliver it via the Northern Sea Road? Well, that depends on the fuel costs. If the government interferes, then there are some other mechanisms. And if the fisher looks where to sell the fish on the international market or the Russian domestic market, of course we need to be able to buy this fish at cheaper prices. Otherwise, we won't be able to do this. Or a separate government decision should be made. Thank you. So it's quite complicated. Now, I would like to ask Sergei Hromagin to tell us what the future of Russian shipbuilding is going to be. Your company turned 17. It's 17 years old, so we would like to hear your opinion. Thank you very much. It's very nice to hear that we are involved with the shipbuilding company, even though we also are in charge of the infrastructure sector, the railway sector, but the water transport is, of course, very important for us as well. Of course, we can't be as romantic as our colleagues. We are the money guys. But we are the biggest leasing company in Russia right now. So we are good at what we are doing. We are doing it seriously. And we decided to take up the task of finding appropriate ships. Today we have 79 ships of different class in our portfolios. Some of the orders were taken by us from China. For some orders, we offered really good conditions. So we also got involved with the Sakhalin project, and we provided leasing for 25 years. That's a new task. Maybe we didn't do it perfectly because we haven't prepared an order for Sovcomflot. That's a really, really big customer, but we are doing our best. Along with shipbuilding sector growth, we invested billions of rubles there. We're also trying our best in infrastructure. We have a pretty successful project right now. That's the first maritime concession in Murmansk, one of the Murmansk ports. And there was a government decree about a certain concession, and this concession agreement has been signed recently. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Nadezhda Zhikhareva, who was in charge of that concession. She really sucked all of our blood, but as a result, a unique document was prepared as a result. And this is just the first step. And before this project became attractive for banks, we worked on this together with the Ministry of Transport, with our other partners. So right now it's a very understandable and attractive project. There are a lot of complex facilities in the Arctic region which will require complex financing schemes. So this is what we are doing, and this is how we are going to develop our operations. Thank you very much. And right now, I would like to congratulate the VGTLK company, which did a lot for this. It's really very important for the Ministry of Transport. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Congratulations to you and your colleagues. And I believe that you have to go. Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you. This was Sergei Chromagin.
Why is it important to have such conferences on a regular basis? Is that we can see the situation, we can see how it develops, how we assess the significance of the river fleet, what is the potential driver, what hinders the development. So now I would like to ask Sergei Yurievich Klavin. Over to you, Alexei Yurievich. Those questionnaires on river transport, they really brought to light those problems that we have spoken about today. So as far as the sea transport, about 10 billion tons are transported, and 90% of the cargo is transported by maritime transportation. So it's a very serious volume of business, and many leading maritime countries pay a lot of attention to this. So the colleagues have spoken about it today, and we don't fully utilize the possibilities that we have, and we must continue this work, because last year we signed new suggestions into the code of trade, maritime trade. But there are other functions too. So they really get in the way of making us more competitive. So it is more difficult, to come to the harbor, to the bay, and build a ship, because as you know, the fleet that we have is fairly old now. So we need to take a look at the positive experience that's available and take those actions that are necessary. This interface of interaction and the maritime component, we really need to, integrate Russian sailors there, and it will help us to utilize it in the Soviet Union when they worked with, international employers, and Russian seamen, Soviet seamen could earn fairly serious money and make profit for the country. Bazhenev already spoke about it today. So it's really, a very important task. So I would like to thank the management of the country, the government, the top management of the federal bodies of the executive power, and we must continue this work. And these conditions will be created in the near future. Unfortunately, the internal maritime transportation has a lot of potential. It has a lot of potential, but it's at the same time its development is hindered. So Bagaevka, Nizhny Novgorod, the conditions are not equal. So most of the seamen think that unfortunately we don't have fair conditions for maritime transportation. And you can see this in the prices for the fuel. And, the rates of the natural monopolies. So we really need to support these initiatives and the work that is being done to strike this balance and to bring to light the advantages of a specific means of transportation. The European partners that we have see two serious criteria: infrastructure costs So the lowest infrastructure costs are those that the government offers. So when a decision is made, we need to take heed of how environment friendly it is. So we need to put the cargo from railways to maritime transportation. In hazardous emissions, we need to reduce those. We need to make it safer. So today, our European partners are building a hierarchy, like this: river, railway, and only then trucks. So when large batches are transported, then the numbers that are mentioned, 300 to 400 kilometers. So in our opinion, we need to consider the following criteria: infrastructure criteria, modernization as calculated by tons to kilometers, emissions, safety, availability or lack of transportation capacity, seasonality, effective use of different means of transportation, bulky cargoes, voluminous cargoes, different ranges, expiration periods, and so on and so forth. And in our case, it is shipbuilding. The fleet is the driver, because otherwise and shipbuilding is a very serious multiplicator. The most important technology is Korean, comes from Korea, because a ship is a very serious engineering creation, is a very serious engineering piece of equipment. So we discussed digitalization at length today. And so now that you have the opportunities for using digitalization, and we can utilize these advantages to the maximum, we can reach those through modern technologies. So a ship is a very serious element. So we must use them more effectively, and we need to implement them when we develop this balance. And we need to see how effective it is. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, but you definitely took more time than expected. So the experts are speaking about a potential deficit of fuel in the market, and when we make environmental requirements more rigid, so it may become, even more alarming. And now we will ask Pavel Yurievich Sorokin to answer this question. So we saw the results of the questionnaire. They were at the beginning of the panel session. And this factor, is very important. So what is river transportation for us? We know that it's mostly, dry or wet cargoes. Those goods that are in very competitive environment, commodities. And now that the technologies are developing, we have 2, 3, 4%, finance rate of interest rate. So when we save a single cent, it adds to the effectiveness. So we need to develop it further. So the northern sea path, it's not just, a new way. Those great discoveries that were made, those great explorers. So it's 30%, the distance is 30% less. How will we be able to convert it into a more effective way? What Vyacheslav Vladimirovich spoke about, icebreakers that can operate in economic conditions, and that can make it more profitable for us. Fishing vessels, icebreakers, when we can demonstrate it, it will be a breakthrough. Now, a few words about financing. Unfortunately, the colleagues, went out. So 2% is 15 years. And 3% is plus 15%. So if you build a tanker and you have to pay for it twice, then this is the only conversation that there is. So basically, these two factors, I mean, even if it's the fastest tanker, I will not be able to make it more competitive. So these are the moments that we need to pay attention to, not just the fuel deficit, because it is increasing, but the cost of financing or some extra financing, no one will understand why they have to pay more. And now over to the question of fuel availability. There is no single vector. So right now we are at a crossroads. There will be two tracks. Fuel with lower sulfur content and using when we decrease the content of sulfur, all of the conventions were signed, so it will be introduced. So it's not going to it will happen. In most producers, I mean, they can make sulfur that is lower, that has a lower contents of fuel. So we think that the cost of fuel with lower content of sulfur will be replaced. To create we add a new thing. So in the Far East, this increase will be higher. But we don't really, I don't see any problem with this. So I think this is what future holds for us. There's a lot of gas in the world, and it will be, better and better. So we will need to take additional measures so the potential is higher, of course, if we create more attractive requirements, because we have a lot of gas, over 100 million cubic meters. So if we create more attractive conditions, then we can increase it. But additional subsidies are necessary so that it's more reasonable for foreigners to come here. But we need to, hold a carrot in front of a donkey. So that a foreign ship can come to a port and go away. So now, concluding my presentation, let me assure you that there will be no deficit, and the measures that the government is taking now to expedite this transfer are already effective, but we can move even further. So there is a lot of potential, and the risks are minimum. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we can come back to the results of our vote. Administrative barriers were mentioned as the main barrier for the effective development of maritime transportation. one window work, one window approach. Over to Larissa Pavlovna Korshunova, head of OTLK. Thank you very much, Elena. Thank you very much, Yuri Alexandrovich. This is the first time for me to participate in this event, so of course I'm worried. Please, I would like to visualize my talk. So first of all, I represent the transport and logistics company. Our company was created 4 years ago. Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, so it's a joint project.
Это
The main focus of our company is increasing the number of container transport via the Eurasian Economic Union. Here you can see the routes along which we work. We support container trains that go between China and Europe. Those are transit trains that go along the Eurasian Union territory. And we changed the rail gauge twice because we have a narrow gauge of railways in China as well as in Europe. This is why we have several railways cooperating. And as a result, we provide this service. Talking about the sheer scale of our operations, over the past 2 years, we increased our capacity threefold. And within the 10 months of this year, we did 314 container trains, and it's almost 2,300 container trains overall. And furthermore, this year we are working actively with the Kaliningrad region infrastructure. And this is why I'm present here. This is our latest project, multimodal transportation with the use of seaports in Kaliningrad and Baltisk. We pin a lot of hope on this technology because this is how we expand the geography of our services in Europe. We start working with Scandinavian seaports, and in the future we are going to find new clients by providing new possibilities regarding various transport destinations. This is what I'm going to mention throughout my presentation. This is our service in the Kaliningrad port, and on the 7th of November we delivered the first 2 container trains that went from Rotterdam. We transshipped them on the broad gauge, and then they went to China. Those were empty containers. We just needed some practice in order to work out various things. And because we have a complex transport technology, our task is to ensure the entire technological process. We need to make it seamless. Not only the technical component of this process, that is the platform delivery and so on, but we also need to ensure the appropriate document support. And another important issue, there's a lot of criticism concerning this. That's the border crossing formalities when the train is delivered. Looking at this task from this point of view, it's not important whether we work via a port with transshipment or if we work exclusively with the railways. As we work on improving our cooperation with the customs service, because this is the biggest controlling authorities on the border. So one of our transport companies suggested this vision of the process in the port, and this type of cooperation with the customs service. And I have to say that this company sees itself not just as a sea transport company. It's not just about the delivery of the cargo to the terminal. It also deals with the customs formalities. It deals with the sending of information to the Russian Railways information system in order to create the necessary railway bills. And this is also very important when we talk about digital technologies and transition to them. So this approach is a very good one, as I see it. There's just one question that arises. What do we see today in the law? What can we offer? What can we do today? Next slide, please. On the 1st of January, we had the new customs code of the Eurasian Economic Union. And once again, we pin a lot of hopes on this document, and I hope that its adoption will drive considerable changes, first of all, in our vision. The important thing is that the code itself is written based on electronic paperwork. It's not our habitual vision when there are paper documents and we digitalize them, but there's digital paperwork as the rule, and paper documents are the exception from this rule. So next year, we will have water transport, sea and river water transport, and a decision will be taken on the customs procedure for this transport. A lot of work has been ongoing at the Eurasian Commission platform. And fortunately, the sea transport representatives found an agreement with the customs services. So it's just a standard document for this sea transport company. That's the general documents, the bill, so all the standard documents that always exist for the sea transport company. And these changes will be adopted on the 1st of July next year because some systems need to be improved. And I believe that starting from July next year, we will be able to fully digitalize our paperwork. It will all be done electronically. This is the stumbling block that has resulted in a lot of dispute recently. And also there are some documents that need to be presented for other types of government control. And various goods need to go through different customs procedures. So various commercial and permitting documents need to be added. A lot will depend here on whether the customs service will be able to get the other parties involved interested in providing those documents electronically. In this case, if all the paperwork is done electronically, then we can speak about a more advanced process of digitalizing the documents. And then we can discuss the one-stop shops, what they are. And this is my vision of this one-stop shop process for a seaport. I have discussed this at various platforms, and recently we discussed this with our colleagues. And unfortunately, the business and the government sector cannot really find an agreement on this term. What is this one-stop shop? What does this term imply? If we can't find an agreement on this, we can't really implement this solution, because businesses sometimes just say that they only need to work on a B2G basis, that is business to the government. But I believe that A sea terminal is a very big transport node where there are a lot of entities interacting, which is why we need to talk about the particular features. Next slide, please. Going back to the slide that I showed, this is about the number of documents to be provided to the customs service. Here I have to say that if the customs service is able to get the business interested in providing all the documents electronically, if the customs service can provide real preferences to such businesses, then this scheme that we recommend, that has already been approved by the Eurasian Commission, this is about preliminary information provision. It can serve as a basis to say that we really have this one-stop shop principle, B2G. These are the key aspects. This is the backbone. And we then can put on the flesh on that backbone. And here are some of the key issues and tasks that need to be resolved to move on from paperwork to electronic documents. Of course, the key issue here is the digital format of various transport documents. I'm sure that a lot of consignors are already using digital documents for the sea transport, but we also have to work out the procedure of recognition of electronic digital signatures. And those digital signatures need to be recognized, even the signatures of other states, of other countries. We can't move any further without that. And this is the same issue for all means of transportation. Everyone keeps asking this question. Of course, all the controlling bodies should move on to digital technologies. The customs service is the most advanced body today because a lot of procedures are now electronic. And moreover, there are projects for automatic procedures without involving any inspectors. This regards the customs service within the country. And here we are talking about the borderlines, the border passes. As for other controlling bodies, they are somewhat excluded from this process. For example, this is the veterinary service, the phytosanitary service. Are they really ready to implement those technologies? That's not clear for the moment. There's another issue. It's been raised here. Customs procedures need to be simplified considerably, and this concerns sea transport. Of course, the passing of a ship from one customs body to another one should be simplified. It should all be made very easy. It's also about the transfer of various ships from one port to another. Unfortunately, there is no holistic approach in the Russian law so far. But yesterday, there was a discussion at the Eurasian Commission regarding the filling in of the transport declaration. And I have to say that 4 states out of 5 made a conclusion that today the customs code of the Eurasian Customs Union makes it possible to regulate the simplification of transit procedures on the national level. This means that we can already start making this process simpler. We can already resolve those issues. Thank you very much. Thank you, Larissa. Seaports are crossroads where railways, car roads, and sea transport meet. If we talk about the interest of the stakeholders, private companies will be interested in these procedures if this is a one-stop shop principle which will save their time and which protect businesses from possible corruption abuse. If these procedures are as transparent as possible, they should also be just transparent and understandable. Any control should be limited. There is a feeling that we cannot actually rebuild our approach in terms of moving on from paper to an electronic document, but this is inevitable if we want to preserve our competitive advantages. And now we are moving on to our final vote, after which I will give the floor to our first row speakers. So what will influence the industry the most over the next 10 years? The options: development and implementation of crewless navigation technologies, the emergence of new types of fuel, organizing year-round navigation on the Northern Sea route, for reduction of navigation dependence on domestic water ways, and 5, digital optimization of information flows in navigation on the global level. And now I'm starting the voting.
Цифровая оптимизация потоков информации.
Digital optimization of information flows on a global level. This is what we just mentioned, actually. This is what we talked about a lot. So this digital optimization of information flows in navigation should really change and transform the industry. And now I would like to ask you about the voting results, and I would like to add my own message to this conference. Now I'm giving the floor to the CEO of TransNavigator. How did you vote? Well, I represent a company which deals with IT. So, of course, I chose option 5. You can turn like this. So, okay, yes, I chose option 5.5, because we will really be able to handle a lot of issues if we fulfill this task. Actually, the schedule of 10 years, the deadline of 10 years is sufficient. Judging by how quickly it all is developing today, 10 years will be enough to resolve this issue. Thank you very much. You haven't spoken yet. Have you finished? My question is whether we will have enough money for digitalization. Is it a question to me? Well, certainly not to me. What's the volume of investments for digitalization? How much money do we need? Well, if it all works well, then Vyacheslav will probably be able to answer this question, practically speaking. Thank you very much. Have you finished your speech, or do you have anything to add? I will just add a couple of words because I only answered this question, so I will speak very briefly. I understand that I don't have much time, but I would like to point out one single task or maybe one single problem, because today we have heard a lot about digitalization, about digital mapping, about e-navigation. And those words are not just words or notions, they are already part of our lives. For example, this Sabeta port that has been mentioned repeatedly today, that's another step towards e-navigation. But it's not enough to create just a platform where we will upload the data that will be used by all the stakeholders within the system. It's also critical to remember about the sources of this data. And thus, those sources include radio navigation equipment, other types of equipment, and I believe that there is a big issue involving this equipment, and I'm talking about the imports of radio electronic equipment for ships sailing under the Russian flag. Before 2017, this equipment was checked by branches of the radio frequency center, the main radio frequency center. And some documents were checked that were provided by the manufacturer. Starting from the 31st of January 2017, the rules changed. And right now, the equipment is checked not based on the documents, but based on an instrumental check. As a result, I can tell you that it takes 6 to 12 months to do all those checks. And you can imagine what it means in the current conditions when equipment changes very quickly. And I'm not talking about new equipment. I'm talking about the equipment that has already been approved, that was approved by various classifying societies as well. So I would like to turn your attention to this fact once again. I believe that this issue deserves more detailed consideration. Our company is ready to participate in this discussion, but we have a practical solution. We need to go back to the old procedure, or if this is impossible for some reasons, then we need to test this equipment at the manufacturer sites that are built specifically for that purpose. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Some of the people present here voted for pilotless navigation technologies. That's number one. And Mr. Pinsky actually voted for this option, number one. You have the floor. Well, actually, you were mistaken. I voted for point number 5. I'm really sorry. The mic is not working properly here. Yes. All right, I will disappoint you because I voted for point 5, because within the next 10 years, it is this e-navigation and digital technologies that are going to be dominating. So those pilotless and crewless navigation technologies are for the next 20 years. That's right. You know that we deal with the development of e-navigation and digital navigation. And this digital navigation is one of our strategies that has been approved, that is being implemented. And I'm glad to see that we said a few years ago that certain solutions were promising, but right now they are already becoming a reality. So this industry transformation is already undergoing, regardless of anyone. If we talk about this unmanned navigation, it will probably emerge as well, maybe before we expect it to happen. Right now, this unmanned navigation is a kind of hype. 5 or 7 years ago, it was even indecent to talk about unmanned navigation. And there is a lot of skepticism even now. But nevertheless, there is a kind of technological race among different companies from America, Europe, China. There are consortiums that implement these unmanned navigation technologies. A special commission has been set up that considers those issues. And almost all the leading manufacturers of equipment for the sea transport keep saying that their equipment is ready for unmanned navigation. So this is about technical hype. And the savings are important. This is the economy, first of all, because, of course, a lot of money is spent on the personnel after the fuel. That's the cost number 2. It's also about safety, because there are ever more factors affecting the safety of navigation, and the human factor brings ever more risks. That's also the technologies that make this unmanned navigation possible. And the same e-navigation is infrastructure that will make it possible to turn it into a reality. And we are talking about remote control of a ship. We talk to everyone about unmanned navigation, but there are also options for remote control of the ship from the shore. There will be several stages. First, it will be a ship with a small number of personnel, with a small crew. And then it will be a ship where the crew is purely secondary. And then there will be a robot ship where there is no place for a human. Nothing at all. Only robots. We are actually part of this process. And I hope that I can make the following public announcement. Let me announce today a project for the first time, which is supported by the Ministry of Industry and Trade. It will be implemented in a few years. That's a comprehensive project for automatic distant control of a ship, and this consortium will bring together various manufacturers. It's also Sovcomflot, Rosmorport, and 3 real commercial ships which will be tested next years. This is a tanker, a dry cargo ship, and an icebreaker. So we are going to work on this. We also have a suggestion for the regulators concerning the legitimization of such automatic ships to decrease the crew on the ship. And it's also commercial offers and suggestions that we will be able to promote on the international market, and those will be the offers by Russian manufacturers. Because if we talk about those crews, about robotics, that's one of the niches where Russian companies have every possibility to have an appropriate place on the global market. And we also have a roadmap for improving legislation and for removing barriers in this area. And we believe that in spring 2019, we will have a regulatory framework which will introduce all the necessary notions.
So I would like to removing a net from a propeller. So those of you who are interested in it, please take part in this competition. Come up with a beautiful, complicated idea. Well, it was a passage for robototechnics. Yeah, we realized this. Well, I don't know, those future sailors, then where will their dream come true? So it is a very important thing. So you don't have to be on board of the ship, so it can change the model of the industry. No one can forecast this because different types of ships can exist for dozens of years. You know, those ships with a crew and those ships without a crew. Thank you. Okay, so we need to get ready for changes today. Yuri Alexandrovich Tsvetkov, please finish our discussion. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for an interesting presentation, very interesting results. So the Ministry of Transportation, can think about what we can do better. It's a good example of feedback. We do regular consultations and with the Russian Chamber of Maritime Construction Administrative Barriers. So Igor Ivanovich Levitin spoke about it at length. So we are resolving it consecutively. Mineral ores, but it can be a barrier. Those ores, we don't have these norms. So Minpромторg, the Ministry of Industry and Trade, is doing this work. So these new ports will be built here. As far as the problems with rivers, of course, we're speaking about unfair things. So the balance will help. It will help us to bring it all to the balance. So we need to find the balance between the amount of investments, because it's totally different. So we need to strike the balance between the automobile transportation and the sea transportation. So this work is being done because it touches upon interests of different industries. I will agree with Sergei Otovich Frank, and ecological issues are the key, because the projects are implemented and we must think about the Arctic and the safety of maritime transportation. A few speakers mentioned this same idea: competitiveness, not only inside Russia, but also in the Arctic. The system of financing and the system of fleet registration, international register. So there will be a few solutions made there that are affecting us negatively, but hopefully we will resolve these issues with our colleagues from the State Duma. Because in the ports, the systems have been verified. So there is a mechanism of concessions. The objects that must be within federal property. So different mechanisms are used there. When they deepen the bottom, and there is an flow coming in, a flow of money coming in. So they are the compensation and the percentage of credit payments. So these systems work. There is a global competition. So I'm recalling old stories, the most famous Kristenko's triangle. So when Vyacheslav Vladimirovich spoke about it, a 10-year contract for transporting cargoes. So there is another element. Shipbuilders are building the fleet, so it can only work like this. Well, it's a debatable issue. I understand that there will be a lot more offers, but all of these talks without long-term contracts are meaningless. Vyacheslav Vladimirovich touched upon a very important subject. We're speaking about large capacity vessels and wider canals are necessary, and old icebreakers, don't work. 50 meters and Alka 60 is 630 meters. So this is what Vyacheslav Vladimirovich spoke about. It is very important. We have a cargo base, 80 million tons, 40 million tons. So 10 to 12 knots per hour. If there is a lower speed, then apart from icebreakers, we will have to construct additional ships. And it will decrease the profitability of the project considerably. So wide icebreakers, powerful icebreakers, they resolve the issue. And I would like to finish my summary with Pavel Yurievich's words. He took a great lift off my shoulders. There will be no fuel with low sulfur fuel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for an interesting discussion. All the best, dear colleagues. Dear friends, I think that now I have the right to address you like this. I will be glad to meet you another time because it is very pleasant for me to meet professionals. But, well, there is no social component, really. I mean, it turns out to be far away from the people. So let it be closer to people. Customs procedures, all the other procedures that will help the medium-sized businesses. Interesting cruises along Russian rivers, fresh fish. And it will motivate the state to respond to the requests of the industry faster, because it will not be related to the professionals, but it will be related to all of us. And all of us will be interested in the development of the river and sea and maritime transportation. Thank you very much. I wish you best of luck.